subs, what is going on? It's Arcturus here from Call of Dragons, and if there's enough interest and enough people like what I do, then I might make a few more of these. So please comment down below and let me know what you think. Hear me ramble on about my stories. I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe and like this video, and yeah, let's go from there.
Get on with it. Yes, get on with it.
Oh, what? Okay.
The winds cut cold through Black Crow Gorge, though the southern lands of Tamarisk were green with spring. The cliffs rose like jagged teeth, black stone veined with silver, as withered trees clawed skyward. Crows wheeled in circles above sprawling canopies within the Goblin Market, where I wandered seeking refuge. I was but a fledgling then, scarcely more than a nameless sword, barely strong enough to be noticed by the mighty banners that draped the realm. Ina's standards flew from every tower, golden lions on scarlet cloth, arrogant and unbending. I bent the knee to them, the great host of Zolan, believing their power might shield me. But men like me are but a resource to be spent. INA cast me aside as though I were less than a dull steel blade, not even worth the grindstone. My name was not written in their ledgers. The oath I gave meant nothing in their courts. I was wind among mountains, destined to be scattered, unless I carved another path. It was in that exile that I found them, in the red marsh of Zoland, misfits, dreamers, outcasts who dared spit in the lion's face. They called themselves the Dark Forces. To outsiders we were rabble, a gathering of blades without polish, of hearts too wild to be chained. Yet I saw strength there in the embers of a fire. Their names I remember as if carved into stone. Dark Knight, quiet but sharp as obsidian. Startisan, the brave and defiant warlord. Jenalyn, flame-haired, manic, unyielding, A-Spade, the weathered, steel-eyed ranger, and proud Xanax, a golden-haired shield maiden. Together, in the shadow of Ina's banners, we swore an oath upon the southern pass to the burning lands. It will be ours, we said, a gate carved by gods, and we, its keepers. But O's our wind, and wind scatters before the storm. Even then, I felt it, the coming clash, the weight of giants pressing down on fledgling wings. And yet, though my blade was untested, I clenched it tight. For in Dark Forces, I had found what INA had denied me, a place, a brotherhood, and the fire to resist their onslaught.
INA dominated Tamarisk from the wild Orcish lands. From New Vola, the northwest tundra of Mount Dreadfang where the shifting sands meet the Firefly Tree, to Dar Alan, where the ever-frozen spires gaze upon the ice of Lake Reverie, all the way to Forgotten Lands, an endless eastern desert, where Dust Swallow's armies hold and bones of the last great dragons lay. Across these lands, every alliance bowed to our will. The court of INA gleamed with power. Marble floors reflected the light of golden braziers, and high above, banners draped like rivers of fire. Our coffers brimmed with coin, tribute wrung from cities that had sworn fealty or been ground to dust. Our forges burned bright with iron, fed by caravans of ore and the blood of slaves. Generals sharpened their blades on the bones of rebels, purging them from the red marsh of Zoland and the pine forests of Crowflock wilds. I, Joku of House Laxamana, born of gold and silk, was raised within this mighty empire. My youth was not spent in hunger or desperation, but in halls where knowledge was power and loyalty was law. To INA I gave my service not from love, but from duty, the kind that binds blood to crown. The Dark Forces of Black Crow Gorge? Petty rabble. Their names carried to our council chambers like a joke, spoken by scouts with mocking laughter. Still, the order was given, and we obeyed. Armies marched at dawn, scarlet banners flaring like sunrise, shields locked, swords bright with the promise of conquest as we cornered them at the gates of burning lands. We fell upon them like a storm. Their walls were makeshift, their tactics untested. They were children on the field, and we cut them down like wheat before the scythe. I remember their eyes most of all, the defiance burning there, too fierce for the bodies that carried it. They fought as if the gates to burning lands were the heart of the world. Victory came swiftly. Yet even as my men sang songs of triumph, I found no joy. The rebels broke, they scattered, and their banners fell into the mud. Still, as I watched them flee, their eyes branded me. Fury burned within them, not extinguished, not conquered, but tempered. And I, Joku, knew that this fury would return.
Far from Zolan, in the eastern land of Sophrostia, I built my own dream within its verdant forests. On the banks of the wellspring of Finon, where elvish civilization began, I saw a kingdom waiting to be born. I called it the French Empire. At first it was only a name, a whisper in the wind. But men gathered to it, as sparks gather to tinder. Lourdes, paysans, exiles. They all came when I spoke of France, of honor, of a banner that was more than gold and steel. They called me Napoleon. Among the soldiers who swore fealty to my banner was Minas. It was grim and solemn, whose calm confidence steadied our hearts more than any castle wall. Then there was Milgaud. Keeping one bond from each enemy, he sled these trophies were added to his hauberk of bone armor. These brave men led side by side with me, and our kingdom was born. Together, we fought for scrap, for beasts of frost and giants of stone. We clashed with warbands that had carved their name into Sophrostia long before ours. We lost again and again, crushed beneath their weight. Yet loss is a forge, and I was tempered by its fire. Each defeat taught me the tactics of war, the mentality of courage, and the bitter taste of betrayal. When WI's shadow lengthened across Sophrostia, when betrayal cut through my people like a poison blade, I did not weep. I gathered the broken instead. From ruin I forged them anew, hammering despair into resolve. And so was born Phoenix Tears, a name that would endure in the chronicles of Tamaris, far beyond the time of my own life. For from ashes, true power rises, and from loss, honor is carved. And so I swore, Sophrostia would remember my name.
Betrayal came swift after our defeat at the gates of Burning Lands, and it came from those we once called brothers. DFR2, a shard of our own dark forces, renamed themselves the Riders of Rohan and turned their cloak for Ina's gold. Their betrayal was not loud, it was a quiet tightening of nooses, a sealing of gates. When our caravans dared to cross their lands, seeking bread, timber, or iron, their blades greeted us. Convoys burned in the night. Screams echoed down canyons we once walked as allies. The sting of treachery struck us deeper than any blade. We answered steel with steel. In a canyon black as a maw of hell, beneath cliffs sharp enough to shred the sky, we lured their banners into shadow. Torches guttered in the wind. Drums thundered like a heartbeat, and when they thought us cornered, we struck. Steel clashed on steel, and the gorge became a tomb. The riders of Rohan fell. Pride shattered upon stone. Their corpses left as carrion for vultures. Yet victory, for all its fire, tasted hollow. The gorge stank of betrayal. Our alliances frayed like rotted rope. Our leaders bickered as dogs over scraps. Ina's advance painted Zolan red. They came not in handfuls but in tides, legions moving like rivers of fire across the map. When whispers of resurgence reached our ears, talk of rebuilding, of striking again, I felt no triumph. Only a chill. The shadows of INA grew too long. The southern lands of Zolan closed like jaws. And so we fled. Exile was no march of glory. We carried what little we had, shattered banners, broken steel, the ashes of our pride, and trudged west into Sophrostia. Behind us, Zolan burned. Towers crumbled. Our names were curses upon the lips of conquerors. I left not as a champion, but as a ghost.
In Ina's marble halls, news of Dark Force's flight reached us like a jest carried by wind. Some lords laughed, sneering as they called them rats fleeing a sinking ship. They raised goblets of wine, their voices thick with mockery. But I, Joku of House Laxamana, did not laugh. I knew the truth of rats. They live. They scurry into shadows, gnaw through wood and stone alike, and wait. They are survivors, and survival is a weapon sharper than any sword. Yet my warnings found deaf ears. The council chambers brimmed with triumph. Reports of conquest poured in like honey, Zolan's villages sacked, fortresses plundered, towers pulled down stone by stone. Ina's armies sang as they marched, their boots pounding to rhythms of victory. Gold poured into the treasury. Merchants bent the knee, filling our coffers with coin. Even the gods, it seemed, had granted us favor. Still, unease gnawed at me. For every fortress we toppled, for every village we set aflame, the rebels gained something we could never touch. Not stone, not steel, not gold. They gained resolve. They learned bitterness, patience, the taste of loss. These are poisons that ferment into fury, and fury does not fade, it festers. I stood in gilded halls, draped in silk and honor, yet I felt the weight of shadows gathering beyond our borders. My lords laughed, drunk on victory, but I sipped my wine in silence, eyes lowered, thoughts far from the feast. For I knew this truth, glory burns bright, but ashes endure longer.
Honor, that was my creed. Others saw only power, numbers, gold stolen from pockets of merchants. They counted soldiers as coins, fortresses as trophies, towers as stepping stones to glory. But I, Napoleon, saw something greater. I believed in fire. When the Great French Alliance surrendered to WI, when their leader betrayed oath and kin alike, deleting 30 towers in a single night, undoing what generations had built, I acted. Where others wept, I seized. Where they despair, I struck. I stole their crown from ruin, seized fragments of loyalty like snatching embers from ash, and with those embers I forged something new. I christened them Phoenix Tears, not merely en alliance, but a rebirth. Side by side with dark forces we marched, our banners stitched together by desperate defiance. Strangers from distant Caltia joined our cause, men and women who chose honor over fear. Among them rode my son, Waskan, young chieftain of the Orcs, hulking in form yet vast in spirit. He laughed like thunder and fought like the breaking storm. In him, he saw not only blood of my blood, but the hope of all who would defy extinction. Together we stood against Ina's tide and W's shadow. The bridges of Hollandal became our envy. Wave after wave they struck us. Legions, behemoths, towers burning like pyres. We answered with fire of our own. Blood ran so thick upon the stones that it painted the river crimson. Each step forward was bought with lives, each stone held with sacrifice. But despite our defiance, we did not win. The tide swallowed us in the end, our banners torn, our forts broken. Startizan and Xanax, leader of Dark Force, were among the dead. The leader of H00 turned cloak and abandoned our cause. Arcturus was one of few survivors that day. But Niel? Never. Our strength was not in towers or gem, but in the will that bound us. Phoenix Tears did not bow, even in ruin. In defeat, we discover what Ina would never understand. Honor is not measured in conquest. It is measured in how one stands when the world burns around them. And so, we stood.
I became a wonder of banners. The dark forces fell. There was broken upon Ina's walls. H00 rose like a spark in the night, and I swore again, believing perhaps this banner would hold. But sparks gutter quickly. H00 shattered, its leaders scattered, and once more I walked among ruins. It is a bitter thing to see the men you once called brothers burn their towers to ash with their own hands, surrendering to despair before the enemy's blade can even touch them. Allies betrayed, friends deserted, fortresses, once proud symbols of defiance, reduced to smoldering embers. At night the horizon glowed as Ina's warlord, Red Shadow, rider of flame, whose mount burned with fire, set the sky ablaze. Yet still I rode onwards. It was on the bridges of Hollindale that fate found me. We were cornered, our banners ragged, our strength near broken, yet still we stood. At my side rode Wayscan, the Orc Wolf Rider. Together we had struck before, bear and wolf, talon and fang, harrying their supply trains, leaving ruins smoldering in our wake. On this dark day, I was glad to call him brother. The bridges were narrow, stone fangs biting the river's current, and across them thundered INA and WAI, their legions endless, their war drum shaking the very sky. We threw everything we had. 15 behemoths roared, their hides scarred by fire and steel. 3 fortresses loomed like titans, our last anchors against tide. Our warriors fought until their arms bled, until their voices broke from screaming defiance into the dark. But the tide was endless. Wave after wave, they came, and at last, the bridges buckled beneath the weight of blood and iron. Defeat should have crushed me. Instead, it forged me anew. For in those final moments, I looked into the eyes of those who stood beside me, Napoleon with his iron honor, Phoenix Tays with their battered yet unbroken banners, and I saw kinship, not forged in victory, but in suffering. So I bent no knee. I gave my sword, and in giving it, I found something INA could never strip from me, a brotherhood greater than any conquest.
The war dragged on like a chain across stone. What began as triumph soured into a burden, heavy even for Ina's iron shoulders. Only 20 years prior, my father fought in the Battle of the Hexwood. Hollindale was once again filled with bloodshed. We had won the season, aye. The rebel armies of Hollindale lay in tatters. Sophrostia was now exposed, and the coffers of INA overflowed with gold. Our hosts marched beneath scarlet standards, songs of conquest echoing across the realm. And yet, I, Joku of House Laxamana, felt only unease. For victory has a taste, and this one was bitter. INA remade itself into OH 100, a name meant to strike or into every foe. Our numbers swelled, our towers stretched across the land like a web of iron. Merchants brought wealth in rivers, feeding an empire that seemed unbreakable. Yet within our ranks, I smelled rot. Gold can buy soldiers, but not loyalty. It can purchase towers, but not honor. Too many of our generals fought not for glory, but for coin. Too many alliances bent the knee not from respect, but from fear. And fear is brittle. It shatters the moment the hammer falls. Our foes, though scattered, were not slain. They lived in shadows, in ancient fortresses of Sophrostia, in whispers carried from camp to camp. Their names became like smoke: Phoenix Tays, Arcturus, Napoleon. Men mocked them openly, but in private, their names carried weight. Not power, perhaps, but something more dangerous. They carried honor. And honor, I knew, was the one thing INA could never purchase. I spoke my warnings in council, but laughter drowned them. To my lords, the war was already won. To me, it had only just begun. For storms do not vanish when the sky clears. They gather beyond the horizon, biding their time. And I feared the storm that was coming.
The end came not with conquest, but with fire. In Sophrostia's heart, where glacier grow and mountains split, the magma demon rose, a beast of flame and fury, with its body of molten rock, its breeze rivers of fire. Too fast it was madness, yet madness was all detriment. We gathered every sword, every ounce of will, every batter de banner. Phoenix tears, dark force remnants, wanderers like Arcturus all stood together upon that frozen plain. The air cracked with it, ice melting into rivers beneath our boots. 40 of horse, 20 of terre. Not enemy now, but warriors bound by necessity. Blood mixed as one upon the snow. The clash was not against men, but against the earth itself made right. The magma demon roar split the heavens, and still we struck. Spears shattered, shields burned to cinder. Men crushed beneath wave of molten rock. yet none fled. I remember the smell, sulfur, blood, and iron. I remember arms trembling from the weight of endless blows. I remember Conrad falling, only for others to step into their place, screaming defiance into the firestorm. At last, with a cry that shook my soul, we felt the beast. It collapsed in fire, the plank cracking beneath its death throes. Victory was ours, but so too was loss. We had lost the season. Our towers lay broken, our forts ashes in the snow. Yet what we gained could not be measured in coin or land. We had forged something far greater, a brotherhood bound not by conquest, but by shared struggle. A name that would endure when empires crumbled. Phoenix tears, and I, Napoleon, swore this, the world would remember.
The banners have fallen, and the field lies quiet now. Ena's towers still burn red against the sky, their victory songs rolling across Afrostia, like thunder that refuses to fade. Let them sing. I have learned that victory is not always written by the hand that holds the crown. We of Phoenix Tayers fought without promise of reward. Although we were defeated, we held the bridges while they burned and stood our ground when others fled. We bound ourselves not by coin or conquest, but by blood spilled shoulder to shoulder, and that bond, forged in ash, endures when empires crumble. I carry the scars of Sophrostia's fire still, the molten rivers where men rose from death to strike again, and Hollandale's roar, when blade broke, but spirits did not. Those moments carved us into something stronger than any flag. It is spirit that outlasts stone, yet the realm does not rest. Across New Vola's deserts, new banners rise. I have heard the whispers. INA will tighten its grip on the banner of the 100 family. And across the seas, rumors speak of a new force, Resurgence Alpha, preparing an invasion of Sophronistia. Against this tide stands Napoleon, now as a true commander. I am not of Napoleon's lands, nor do I speak his tongue. But in battle we understood each other perfectly. Perhaps that is enough. His men are fierce and loyal, following him not for the banners above them, but because he never asks his men to give what he will not give himself. Yet even he must bow to Zelvany's empire and endure the shadow of Mabarin's dark magic. We speak of freedom, but we stand upon borrowed ground. Among us walks Joku, smiling, clever, watchful. She wears a Phoenix Tayer's badge with grace, but I have seen her eyes when 100 immortals riders pass. She serves 2 masters, and one day we may pay for it. This season ends beneath 100's banners, but their flame is borrowed. Ours burns lower, steadier, waiting. The war is over, but the embers remain, and embers, given breath, can ignite into a great flame. Phoenix Tayers will arise once more.
So yeah, if you'd like to join, I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe and like this video, and yeah, let's go from there. All right, guys. Long live the nubs. Never give up. Always fight. Rah.